epidemic. It was a pandemic. It was worldwide. But my mother had to go out shopping, and my then 3-year-old sister had a cold, and my mother thought it'd be best to leave her at home. Well, they had a neighbor who thought, that's not a cold, that's polio. And she called the health department, which came, took my sister, there was no one home to stop them, put her in one of the hospitals that they had set up particularly for polio victims of the epidemic. And it took my mother 3 or 4 days to find my sister, by which time she had come down with polio. It was rough. Now, about 1930, I guess, there was a popular surgeon in this country named Albee, his family name. I don't recall his first name. But in any event, he had developed a reputation during the First World War for being able to make one live man out of 2 dead ones. And my father engaged his services to operate on my sister, which he did, and very successfully. After the surgery, she was able to walk again. Unfortunately, about 3 months later, she fell, fractured her hip, and never walked again without crutches. We're very fortunate to live in these days when so many serious problems like polio have been held off by systems of prevention. Reed, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Let's thank Sabine, who developed the vaccine, which has protected our people for so many years. And yes, it is. These things do come back, though. You have to be very much on the alert. We have with us a guest, Cathy Young. Cathy has for years now been representing us not only in the legislature, in the Assembly, but also in the Senate. And she's our state senator. She has worked long and hard for Chautauqua County, gives us a lot of help. She has given us, made sure that we get a lot of funding directed this way, and she hopefully will be there for a long time. But at any rate, good morning, Cathy.
Good morning, Reed.
And it's just so sweet of you to give up your Saturday morning and come up here and be on the air.
Well, I'm very glad to be here, as you know.
Well, I know it's quite a drive, and it's a great gift to our local people. Now, I wanted to get down to the Senate. Of course, that's where your bailiwick is, and it seems though the Senate is still in some sort of a confusion at best.
You know, that confusion is a good word for it. Unfortunately, we are being controlled right now by New York City, and you see this confusion that reigns. One of the big issues that I'm so concerned about has to do with the state budget, because now it's 38 days late. We have a fiscal crisis going on that needs to be solved. And so we've been pushing very hard on my side of the aisle to try to get something done and get something started. Right now, unfortunately, in Albany, they are disregarding the law because we passed budget reform in the year 2007. And what that requires is that bipartisan groups from both houses, and by that I mean the Senate and the Assembly, get together and hammer out a budget agreement in public so that the people could see what was going on. Last year, they disregarded the law. They broke the law, actually, and they had secret negotiations. It was 3 men in a room from New York City, and by that I mean it was the governor, the Speaker of the Assembly, and now the Majority Leader of the Senate. And they came up with one of the worst budgets in New York State's history. It taxed out of control, it spent out of control, and it had very serious consequences. People lost their star rebate checks that they need for property tax relief. It drove up people's utilities because, believe it or not, during these tough economic times, it actually increased utility costs, utility taxes. We figured, Reed, that it cost the average family about $2,400 extra per year just by what they did in the state budget. And now we have a $9 billion shortfall, and we need to get together and solve this issue because the school districts don't know what their funding is going to be. We have our hospitals and nursing homes that are getting severely cut, and that's wrong because we need our rural health care. And so there are a lot of tough issues, and we just need to get to the table and get this worked out.
Okay. Yeah, you're not getting paid, are you?
No, I'm not.
That's right. That was part of the budget reform.
Well, that was actually previous to the laws of 2007, but I don't think that people should get paid if they're not getting the job done. So I agree with that law, and we've been bringing up amendments. You know, part of it too, Reed, is that the governor's holding back on funding from previous years that should go out to stimulate the economy. For example, construction projects. The governor has refused to release the money, even though it's there, for road and bridge projects. And we all know what a long construction season we have during the summer for those projects, and I'm being facetious, obviously.
Yes.
But we need to get those going, and people are being laid off from work who work for construction companies. Asphalt plants upstate are laying people off and are in danger of closing. Several times we've brought up amendments and tried to push through the construction projects so the governor would be forced to release the money. He hasn't done it, and so I'm very concerned about those issues because they're having a negative impact on our economy and making a bad situation worse, and that's wrong.
Yeah. Also, there's all the craziness going on. People are being investigated in the Senate. Bruno just got, I guess I don't know if he got sentenced. He was your majority leader one point.
Yep, he got sentenced to 2 years.
2 years in the slammer. And La Padra was
Pedro Espada.
Yeah, Espada.
Oh my gosh.
They're checking him out for putting people to work.
Well, they should. You know, they really should. And if somebody breaks the law, they deserve to go to prison.
Right.
And that's what we've got a clean house in Albany. And I'm very concerned about ethics laws and changing the laws so that these, because it's not just Pedro Espada under investigation right now, it's Malcolm Smith, who is their president, it's John Sampson for a smelly deal at the Aqueduct racetrack, and the list goes on and on and on. And we need to do something to change that.
Yeah, one of them jumped up and started yelling outrageously. It was a racist issue. He's a black man.
Oh yes, that would be Kevin Parker, our dear friend, who is actually he's actually under felony charges right now for assaulting a New York Post photographer last year, and they haven't handled the case yet. But he has quite a very colorful history because it started, I think, in 2005. He actually assaulted a woman who was writing a traffic ticket because he was illegally parked in New York City. He assaulted her, and they dropped the charges so that he could go to anger management classes. Well, obviously they didn't take. He also got in trouble for actually choking one of his staff members and throwing her glasses on the floor and stomping on them. I mean, the guy is just, he doesn't belong in the Senate. And now he's really been stirring up and accusing people of racism, and it's not true. And so, you know, it adds to the chaos, and we need to focus on the people's business.
Yeah, the people's business ain't happening. Do you think they ever will pass a budget? Eventually they will.
Well, you know, I hope so. I heard that possibly this week, and I'm hoping this is what happens, is that, you know, the governor takes more of a leadership role because he kind of goes in fits and spurts. But hopefully we can get something done. But the real stumbling block, unfortunately, is in those who are leading the Senate right now because they are refusing to negotiate. And I've never seen anything like this, Reed, where they just won't go to the table at all. And of course, when you don't do that, nothing gets done. And so we're trying to push them, but it's all New York City controlled, and they have their own agenda. And unfortunately, they push through a very anti-upstate agenda, and they continue to want to do that, and we have to try to change that.
So you did sideline one of them. They were going to mess up the farm labor situation up here.
Right.
And I think you personally had a lot to do with derailing that one.
I did, as a matter of fact, and we got that bill actually referred to the Senate Agriculture Committee, and we were able to stop it. Now, unfortunately, what I'm hearing, Reed, is that they are going to reintroduce the bill and change it because it could get referred to the Agriculture Committee because there was a reference in the bill to the Commissioner of Agriculture. They're going to remove that reference and once again try to push it through. And this is devastating for our agricultural industry upstate.
What's the nitty-gritty of this?
Basically what it does three things. It puts in place the most restrictive overtime laws in the entire country. You know, in California, after 60 hours, overtime kicks in for farm workers. This bill says it would kick in after 55 hours, excuse me, which would drive up costs for farmers. And Wisconsin, you know, we're not like California. California has a year-round growing season. They have 3 different crops, And they have these mega corporate farms. In New York State, we're very different. We have mostly smaller to mid